The evacuation ships hummed with a solemn finality as they departed Earth's orbit for the last time. Eva stood at the observation deck of the HMS Perseverance, her hands pressed against the cold transparasteel window, watching her homeworld shrink into a blue marble against the vast darkness. Beside her, Oliver checked the manifest on his datapad, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. 300 billion souls, he muttered, his voice hollow. 300 billion people, forced to abandon everything because the Confederation deemed us too volatile for galactic society. Eva's reflection in the window showed eyes that burned with barely contained fury. They called us warmongers, said our aggressive tendencies made us incompatible with civilized species. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. We tried to warn them. The Galactic Confederation had issued their ultimatum 6 months prior. Humanity had been given a choice that was no choice at all. Abandon Earth and relocate to designated colony worlds under Confederation supervision, or face military intervention. The Council of 7 representing the Valkyrie, the Thryn, the Moldef, and 4 other species had voted unanimously. Humanity was to be removed from the galactic equation. Ambassador Chun had stood before the council and delivered humanity's final message. Eva had watched the broadcast with billions of others. The ambassador's words echoed in her memory even now. "We came to you in peace," Chun had said, his elderly face grave on every screen across human space. "We offered friendship, trade, and cooperation. You responded with suspicion and prejudice. You judged us not by our actions in your presence, but by our history, a history every species shares in some form. We warned you that forcing us from our home would have consequences. We warned you that humanity has never responded well to existential threats. You chose not to listen. The Confederation had laughed. What could one species do against 7, against a military force that had maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years? They would soon learn. Oliver turned away from the viewport, his expression hardening into something that reminded Eva why she'd recruited him for Project Exodus. He wasn't just a logistics coordinator, he was a strategist who understood that sometimes the best defense was patience. The time lock on the Sol System defense grid activates in 72 hours, he said quietly. Are you certain about this, Eva? Once it begins, there's no stopping it. Eva finally looked away from Earth. They forced us to leave our home, Oliver. They wanted us gone so badly, they were willing to threaten genocide. We gave them every chance to reconsider. We explained, we pleaded, we warned. Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. They chose this. What the Confederation didn't know, what humanity had deliberately hidden, was that Earth wasn't being abandoned. It was being transformed into the galaxy's most elaborate trap. For 6 months, while negotiations had publicly dragged on, humanity had worked in secret. Every major city had been rigged. Every military installation had been repurposed. Every satellite, every defense platform, every weapon humanity possessed had been integrated into a single massive system. The Sol System had become a fortress that would only activate after humanity's departure. Confederation had already announced their intentions. Once humanity evacuated, Earth would be reclaimed and redistributed to species more deserving of such a pristine world. The Valkyrie had claimed the northern continents. The Thryn wanted the oceans. The Moldith had expressed interest in the mineral-rich asteroid belt. They would arrive expecting an empty prize. 3 days after the last human ship cleared the heliopause, the Confederation fleet arrived at Earth. 2,000 warships representing the combined might of 7 species. They came prepared for automated defenses, perhaps some booby traps. What they found was something else entirely. The first wave of ships entered orbit unopposed. Velkari commanders congratulated themselves on their bloodless victory. Then the system activated. Every satellite suddenly blazed to life, but they weren't firing weapons. They were transmitting. Every screen on every Confederation ship suddenly showed the same image. Ambassador Chun, recorded 3 months prior, sitting calmly at a desk. "If you are seeing this," Chun's image said, "then humanity has departed, and you have come to claim our home. I wish I could say we were surprised, but we know your nature now. You preach peace while practicing conquest. You claim moral superiority while committing theft. We tried to warn you. You didn't listen." Eva watched the feed from the Perseverance, now safely positioned 3 light years away. Oliver stood beside her, along with 200 other members of humanity's leadership. They watched as Chun's message continued. "You asked us to leave peacefully, and we have honored that request. But understand this, we are leaving you something in return. Not weapons we could have rigged Earth to explode, but we're not the monsters you imagine. No, we're leaving you something far more valuable and far more dangerous: knowledge." Throughout the Sol system, automated systems began broadcasting on every frequency. Detailed specifications for human weapons technology. Complete files on human tactical doctrine. Historical records of every war humanity had ever fought, complete with analysis. Medical research that outlined human biology in excruciating detail, and by extension, human vulnerabilities. But there was more. "We're uploading our entire database of xenobiology," Chun's image continued. "Every scan we ever took of Confederation species, every medical exchange, every biological sample you trusted us with during our short partnership. We're broadcasting it all to everyone, everywhere, with no encryption. By now, every species in the galaxy, including your enemies, your rivals, and your own dissidents, knows exactly how to kill you, how to create biological weapons tailored to your genetic weaknesses, how to exploit your technological blind spots." The Confederation commanders watched in growing horror as their own biological weaknesses were disseminated across open channels that reached every corner of known space. "You called us too dangerous for galactic society," Chun said, his calm expression never wavering. "You were right, but not because we're violent, because we understand a fundamental truth you've forgotten during your 3,000 years of peace. The greatest weapon isn't the one that destroys your enemy. It's the one that makes your enemy destroy themselves." Eva allowed herself a cold smile. "Mutually assured destruction," she said softly. "We explained the concept to them a dozen times. They dismissed it as primitive human paranoia." Oliver nodded, watching as the Confederation fleet began frantically trying to jam the transmissions, to stop the flood of information. But it was far too late. The data had already been copied, distributed, and weaponized by 100 different factions across the galaxy. "We didn't fire a single shot," Oliver observed. "We just made sure everyone knows everyone else's secrets." "The Confederation maintained peace through superior force," Eva replied. "We just made that force obsolete. Within a year, every species will be vulnerable to every other species. The power imbalance is gone. They'll be too busy trying to maintain their own security to worry about conquest." Chun's final words echoed across the fleet. "We warned you that humanity has survived because we understand deterrence. You forced us to leave. Very well, but we're taking the old galaxy with us. What comes next is on you. Congratulations, Confederation. You wanted Earth. You can have it. And you can have the chaos you've earned." Eva turned away from the screen as the feed ended. Behind her, the observation deck was silent. Ahead, the colony ships continued their journey to the Andromeda Galaxy, where humanity would build anew, far from Confederation space. "Do you think they'll learn?" Oliver asked quietly, Eva considered the question, then shook her head. Maybe, maybe not. But they'll certainly remember. They wanted humanity gone because they feared what we might become. Now they'll spend the next century fearing what they've become because of us. The Perseverance jumped faster than light travel, carrying humanity toward its new home. Behind them, the galaxy they'd been. Forced to leave descended into an arms race that would reshape interstellar politics for generations. They had forced humanity to leave. Humanity had warned them. Now they faced the consequences. And in the end, humanity hadn't needed to fire a single shot.